Hey guys, for the third project in the bedroom renovation, I'll be transforming these unfortunate looking melamine wardrobes to a shaker style with just one sheet of MDF, some glue and some primer and paint. Let's go. When we bought this house, we removed an outrageous number of wardrobes and drawers from this room, but kept these last two, one each for me and Abby, as they felt pretty sturdy still, and perhaps with a bit of love we can bring them back to life and make a saving over buying new or building from scratch. So if you've got some outdated wardrobes or kitchen cabinets that you're not sure what to do with, this video is for you. Once the doors were removed, I could go about unscrewing the handles and pulling off the ornate plastic beading with tongue and groove pliers. So now I have these deep channels that I could try to fill and sand smooth, but as they're in the shaker style layout, I decided to go for that look, and in doing so cover up the channels with MDF. Which leads me on to the sponsor of this video, MEDITE SmartPly, a manufacturer of high-grade MDF who kindly sent me a sample pack for all the different MDFs, which blew me away as I hadn't realised how many different types there were for use in different scenarios. Now professionals seem to really like this moisture resistant stuff, which you can easily identify as it has a green central band. Because it's resistant to moisture, it's less prone to warping even in humid areas like a bathroom. It's also a very dense MDF, so it's ideal if you want to route more complicated profiles. But since I'm just cutting at 90 degrees, I decided to go with MEDITE Clear, which weighs a bit less, and there's also no added formaldehyde, which reduces off-gassing of volatile organic compounds. Why do I care about that suddenly? Well, Abby and I became proud parents a couple of weeks ago, and the cot will go next to the wardrobes, so you know, that's me being a good dad. I'm going for a reasonably chunky shaker look, so I'm using the 12mm MDF for this project. The sheet was too large to get up the stairs, so I cut it in half on the driveway with my circular saw and then could move both pieces upstairs where my friend Steve, a recurring character on this channel, helped me cut it into strips with his Festool plunge saw and guide rail. For the stiles on the long side of the doors and for the rails at the top and bottom, we set the guide for 80mm wide strips. The centre rail needs to be a bit wider to cover the channels, so there we went for 11mm. Now you don't need such fancy equipment for this, you can get guide rails for cheaper circular saws, or you could use something with a straight edge to butt a jigsaw against to get a nice straight line. I then cut the MDF strips to length on the miter saw, and as the horizontal rails in particular need to be a very precise length, I cut them a little long first and then shaved them back slowly by pushing the piece into the blade in its downward position to make it flex, lifting it up and cutting it, which makes it easy to reduce the length by a fraction of a millimetre each time until I got a snug fit. To glue the MDF to the doors, I went for miter bond adhesive, which sticks to pretty much anything by applying the glue to one surface and the spray to the other. I did one door with this, but the problem is that the miter bond is too good and it sticks almost immediately. So I thought I'd try something different with this polyurethane wood glue, which gives you 5 minutes before it sets rather than just a few seconds. But this isn't perfect either because it slides about even when it's clamped together, so in the end I decided to mix the two. A little miter bond to get a reasonable hold immediately, but mostly the polyurethane wood glue so I could adjust as necessary. If you have any good glue recommendations for this, do pop them in the comments. So all the outer MDF is easy to line up with the edges, but the central rails will all need to be level with one another to look right. So I measured up the same amount from the bottom of the door, made some marks on the stiles and could line up the rail with those. And to ensure they were straight, I used a square to get them at right angles to the stiles. I then picked off any hardened glue squeeze out with a Stanley knife, and once all 4 doors were done, I filled any gaps with fine wood filler, but perhaps you could use some caulk here that may flex a little better. Once dry, I gave everything a good sanding down as this will help the primer to adhere better. This is the Parkside orbital sander and shop-vac from Lidl, both of which are great basic tools if you're just getting started out with DIY. I vacuumed up the dust and gave everything a wipe down. Who knew baby wipes were so useful? So as I'm going to be painting the entire house over time, I've been putting some research into paint brands, and consistently voted near the top is Johnston's paint. So I took a trip down to one of their decorating centres. Any kind of melamine, laminate or foil wrap is a tricky surface to paint, so we really need a good primer. And the chap at the store recommended Zinsser Bin, which I've used before, over that of their own brand multi-surface primer. And it's great for MDF too. I'll link a few different options in the description though. I applied it with a foam roller as I like the finish that you get with it over the more fluffy pile rollers. The primer dries really quickly, so you can have 2 coats done in less than an hour and a half. Because it does raise the grain of the MDF slightly, I gave it all another pass with a sanding block and 120 grit sandpaper. So for the finishing coats, Johnston's recommended their new 𝐌𝐚𝐭𝐫𝐢𝐚 water-based satin paint, which is replacing their acrylic satin. They had a helpful chart of all the different paint finishes, but I was very keen to try water-based as I find oil-based messy and difficult to clean off brushes at the end. I've absolved myself of responsibility for picking paint colours, so Abby picked out Ammonite by Farrow & Ball, which Johnston's colour matched with the 𝐌𝐚𝐭𝐫𝐢𝐚 paint. I have to say I feel a bit sorry for Farrow & Ball as they do all the work and R&D, and people like me come along and just copy their colours, but there we are. So the overall plan is that once the bedroom is plastered, we'll paint the walls in a matte emulsion of the same colour. The thinking is that as it's a small room, made smaller by my last 2 projects, so having the wardrobes and the walls the same colour will hopefully make it feel a bit bigger. So after 2 coats of paint, I could move on to the wardrobes themselves, and I followed the same process, but only on the areas that will be seen. Once the doors were back on, the final touch was to add some new doorknobs. These are just Amazon Basics matte black metal knobs, and I used my new toy to get them level, drilled through and screwed them on. Here's how they came out, and I'm really pleased with them. It was a fun upcycling project, except for the painting, that was tedious, but it's been great to learn a bit about MDF. Where once upon a time, about 3 years ago, construction materials confused the heck out of me, they've now become a bit of a comfort zone, so it's good to mix things up and have a play around with some finishing material instead. If you're interested in building shaker-style built-in wardrobes from scratch and you have the setup for it, I highly recommend Peter Millard's channel, which I've linked below. A big thanks again to MEDITE for the MDF. There's a link to some interesting stuff they're doing below as well. So I think there's one project left in this bedroom, but a bunch of smaller jobs which I might make a vlog style video about. In the meantime, I'm switching back to my garden room series, so I'll catch you there. Thanks for watching.